Always does. I love it here.
Didn't you get recruited here?
I did, yeah. Ted Owens recruited me, and JoJo White was on the staff at the time, and I actually had a visit scheduled here that I wound up canceling. That I was scheduled to come visit, and it was really funny that at the time I was down to Duke, Iowa, Syracuse, and Kansas. And Coach K had called me and said, "Where are you in your decision?" And I said, "Well, I'm leaning toward Duke." And he said, "Well, what does that mean? You're leaning toward Duke. Percentages, where are you?" And I don't remember what percentages I gave, but I gave some percentages, and Kansas was, at the end of it, kind of the lowest percentage. He says, "Well, is Kansas really in this?" And he said, "You need to be honest with everybody." And so I called Coach Owens and said I was sick and couldn't come. that was the scope of my honesty at the time.
Do you ever, in some of these places you go to around the country, do you ever wonder what it would have been like to play there? Like
yeah,
here?
I do all the time. One of the guys that I played with and against in high school in Los Angeles, Kerry Bogney, who played here as a freshman. Played for Coach Owens, and then I think he played a year for Coach Brown, and then transferred out back to Cal State Fullerton. And so yeah, I watched his progress. I mean, he had a really good freshman. I think he averaged double figures as a freshman. He was a high-scoring player. He was a really good player. So yeah, I thought about that a lot. And you think about the funny part is you can only play for one guy. And back then I was choosing coaches. I wasn't choosing necessarily choosing a school. And the four guys that I liked the best were Coach K, Lute Olson at Iowa, Boeheim at Syracuse, and Coach Owens here.
How do you think recruiting has changed?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, back then there were no restrictions on phone calls, but those were the rotary phone days when, when the phone rang, you answered it because you didn't know who it was, and you thought, hey, it might be, maybe there's a problem, or you got to answer the phone. So I think my mom wound up taking the brunt of the recruiting process. She answered the phone all the time. But I think it would be in a way easier now because you can screen and you don't have to answer every little thing. So I think it's changed a lot. But I think there are more people involved in it now. Back then it was, for me it was just my parents and my high school coach that were involved in the recruiting process. Now you've got a lot of other interests.
And a lot of these kids are superstars before they ever step on campus. Do you think that's a good or bad thing?
I don't think it's either one. I think it's fine. It's funny how we seem to say, well, if a kid, we don't like the one and done rule, so we say let the kid go right to the NBA. But then we want to shelter the kid, and we can't have too many phone calls. Well, but he can go right to the NBA. I mean, we've got teenagers in the Olympics. We've got teenagers playing professional sports. I don't see how recruiting, now everybody's worried about, well, we don't want to bombard a kid. We're worried about too many phone calls. They're mature enough to handle.
Well, Nerlens Noel's injury, do you think it'll change the one and done rule?
No, that's an NBA thing, and it's a business rule. And the way I look at it, it's not a one and done rule. If a kid could go out of high school, they can still leave after their freshman year. You're still going to have the same issues. We have college basketball has an early entry problem. It doesn't have a one and done problem. And so, the NFL has 3 years, and there's no discussion. You're staying 3 years out of high school. And the reason they do it is they don't want to pay to develop talent. Why would they do that? And baseball's set up for it because they have all this minor league system. I still don't think even with the development league, basketball is necessarily set up to develop players. The draft is for immediate help. It's not for future development, and at least at this level. And so I think if the NBA could make it a higher eligibility, it would, because why should they pay to have somebody sitting on their bench and wait for them to develop? It doesn't make business sense. So I don't think a kid getting injured, we're not worried. Would we worry if a sophomore got hurt? Kid got hurt. And if he got hurt in the NBA, our concern seems to be, well, if he got hurt in the NBA, at least he'd be getting paid. And I'm not sure that's the right analysis. I don't know. Might be for some people, it's not for me.
Do you think, from a coach's perspective, what do you think of it?
Well, one and done guys you guys talk about today,
You think it's harder to coach?
you go back 20, 30 years ago, those one and done guys stayed through their juniors and seniors. You take Lou Alcindor at UCLA, Bill Walton at UCLA, so it's just, they're all there back then. The teams were real teams back then. So you could be a hotshot freshman, but you weren't no one and done guy. You had to wait your turn. So from that standpoint, the talent to me, you know, what they were and who they were at that time was the best they could be, just like the kids today are who they are and what they are. You know, 20 years ago, Noel's not playing. I remember Richard Washington sitting on the bench for UCLA, waiting his turn to play, going back to win. I'm just going back to the history of the game. And so I like the baseball rule, I like the football rule, that you need three. The only thing I would like to see, and this is just me in my opinion, that whoever wants to try the pros, the NCAA should let them try. They should get their expenses paid for and let them play the whole month of July for that franchise. And by August 1st, if they don't sign you and you haven't signed with an agent, go back to college, which would force you to go to class spring semester so you're eligible to play another year of college. If we're talking about student athletes and graduation rates, well, that's what I would do. And then maybe, okay, so you lose 15 a year. Well, okay, you're losing 15 a year as seniors anyhow. So if these guys want to go, let them go that way. But we're just reflecting back on my experiences here in 70, and they always bust me on this, on the 73-4 season when we beat UCLA in South Bend. And they were number one. I think that Tuesday we're here playing against Kansas, and it came out that Monday night that we were number one. So you talk about this place being crazy. Well, you know, here you are number one, you're going to get beat. And we ended up winning by, Ted Owens was the coach, and I think we ended up winning by 2 points at the end. We just ran the clock out and stole it. And then the following Saturday we had to go back to Paulie Pavilion. It was a payback game, they beat us. But when you look at the guys that played, and like even Jay's era at Duke, you didn't have what we're seeing the last 10 years. And you waited your turn as juniors and seniors would dominate. We had a kid over here by the name of Joe Klein from Slater, Missouri, that was a great freshman. As a matter of fact, his freshman year, 80-81, we had Trapuka, Jackson Woolridge, and John Paxson to go with Joe Klein and Tim Andre. And in December of 80, those guys knocked off Kentucky and Freedom Hall. They were number one. And then in February, they knocked off Virginia and Chicago. They were number one. But Joe Klein's father, I'll never forget, his freshman year, he comes in over Thanksgiving because Joe was averaging 25 and 15 in high school, and he only had like 6 points in that game. And he came in, he said, "What's wrong with Joe?" I said, "It's not his turn." I said, "He's got four number one draft picks in front of him, and he's only a freshman." So after his freshman year, he pulled him, transferred to Arkansas. But that, you know, that's how we coached back then, and that's what it was all about when you're looking at teams and how you went. And I remember one year when Larry was here, Brown, and Danny was here that year too, and we had ACC officials, and Dick Paparo was the ACC official, and we're not getting anything going in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game. So he goes running by, and I go, "That's typical ACC BS." He teased me up, and I get like the next 5 calls. And Larry Brown knows what I did, so all of a sudden he stands up and yells, he gets a technical. But that's how you work the officials back then. It was all part of the game. But, I mean, those teams, like Danny's team, Manning's team, they were good teams, and that's what it was.
Speaking of freshmen, what do you guys think of Ben McLemore?
He's the best freshman in the country. There are some other really good ones. Marcus Smart is terrific. Anthony Bennett, he's terrific. But Ben's got that it thing that you can't teach somebody. He glides up and down the floor. His percentages are off the charts. And he's got I know that the staff is trying to get him to have that killer instinct, but he's got a humility about him that's really, really nice. And he's a great teammate. He'll grow into all that. I'm confident of that. But he's a great kid, in addition to being a great player. And whenever he decides to move on with this year, next year, who knows? But he's got a magnificent future ahead of him. He's only scratching the surface of how good he's going to be, and he's pretty damn good now.
I'm also impressed with what he said about Marcus Smart. I mean, when they came in here 2 weeks ago, that wasn't a fluke. I mean, I was just shocked on how they just came after Kansas here. And between Kansas's turnovers and offensive rebounding by Oklahoma State, they end up with 49 points. I'm going, that doesn't happen in Lawrence. But you take Marcus Smart as the spark of that team as a freshman point guard. Boy, he's right up there with the kid you just talked about. I mean, that was impressive. But the other night, I just thought that enough was enough. And, winning at K-State by 4, it was like, okay, let's go. We're not going to split. We're going to sweep. And, boy, that thing was over. I thought when Tarp came in the game, he got those 6 assists, and they blow it out to double figures. That was the turning point of that game. I just love how he takes the pressure off the other guys on the perimeter. And that's Kansas basketball right there, what we saw.
Do you think that point guard is the most important thing for them to establish? Tharp or if Johnson gets it back, anything like that, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, you could point to that. I think it's a collective thing, though. I think Digger's right. The Oklahoma State game was the first time I thought that Kansas played a little soft. They weren't completing passes and standing straight up and down. That's not a point guard issue. That's a team issue. But I don't think that's who they are. The way they played in that game, the way they played at TCU, I think more of who they are is not necessarily you're going to see that margin all the time, but it's more who they are and who they're capable of being is the way they played against K-State, the way they played earlier in the year. They didn't win all these games by playing the way they did in that 3-game stretch.
We saw them in Atlanta when they lost to Michigan State. And that was sort of a shock because Michigan State just came off that loss to Connecticut over in Germany. But it's funny when you see, like, there's maybe 8, 12 teams out there. Obviously, Kansas, Michigan State, we saw what they did to Michigan the other night. Wow. Have them down 30 in the second half. I think teams, and here's what people don't realize. The season's a week longer this year. I mean, the national championship game is 4 weeks from this coming Monday night, the 8th. So as a coach and with your team, you got to be careful because by the time, and he knows he played it, and I coached it, by the time the end of February comes around, you're worried about mental fatigue and you're worried about their legs. And then you got a conference tournament coming up, and you want to win that. You want to finish your conference season strong so you get a 1 seed or a 2 seed in the conference tournament. And then, because that's going to affect your seeding for March Madness. You're going to be a 2 seed or 1 seed in March Madness. Well, okay, this is where it all counts. So it's going to be interesting to see how the coaches this year take that extra week of what we got to do and why to make sure we don't burn out mentally or we don't burn out with our legs, because that's something. And so for this to happen to Kansas now with that stretch of a week, to me, they'll recover. And that's the most important thing. So to have this happen, or we're talking about, I love Minnesota, and they had a 4-game losing streak, and you say what's going on there, or you look at Illinois back when, 12-0, then all of a sudden now they're 3-7 in the Big 12, or the Big 10. I'd say the mystery conference right now to me is what is going on in the Pac-12, with UCLA and Arizona, even Oregon, everybody thought, and then here it comes, and then you look at the Mountain West. The preseason, we're talking about San Diego State, we're talking about New Mexico, we're talking about UNLV. Oh, Colorado State. Now they're ranked. So that's what's crazy about this year is that all you're looking to do is stay healthy, have legs, have mindset. So when all of a sudden, when you think about it, on the 17th, when the brackets come out, where are we going and who are we playing? And that's what happened to Kansas last year, I thought. In the way they finished up going strong.
Coach, what do you think Elijah needs to do? He's been in a slump for a prolonged stretch of time. What does he have to do to get out of that?
It's amazing what happens. A lot of guys, when you're playing with good upperclassmen like a year ago, he's doing this, having big games, also getting 8 or 10 in the second half when they need them. So now all of a sudden those guys go and it's your turn. Oh. And I think he's gone through that transition. That's what I like when Tharp's out on the floor. It takes the pressure off him will you just go back and find a way to score? And I think once that kicks in, I mean, I love Relaford, he'll guard anybody. And Withy, you know, I mean, when you're looking at somebody can dominate inside. So the puzzle's there, and Johnson, as you look, is one of the guys you're saying what's wrong. He's probably put too much pressure on himself. I think sometimes when these guys start missing threes, I had a talk with Pat Connaughton from Notre Dame, and he had a stretch. He's a great pitcher in baseball. He'll be probably in the majors. He had a stretch. I said to him one day after practice, I was going, I said, do yourself a favor. Will you step back in the line and get your feel back shooting a 16-footer or 14-footers? So when they win the 5 overtime game the other night against Louisville and Notre Dame, he ends up with 16 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists, like all it was. And then the other night against DePaul, he hits a big corner 3 because it's back. And I think that's what you got to do with certain players is just stay with them. You know what's in them, it's in them. And for them to be a force come March, he's got to be one of the key players because he was last year when they got to the Final Four.
You guys go around the country, see a lot of great venues. Anything in particular you look forward to when you come here? How unique is Allen?
This is the best. We've been here, what, 5 years out of 9?
I think so.
We come here every year. Now, you know, it's amazing. I've coached here in the NCAA tournament. I've coached here against Kansas. About 2 years ago when we were here, it's the first time probably I was out. When I saw the Star Spangled Banner with the trumpets, and then you see it going, rock, okay, and the acoustics. I mean, you get goosebumps. And I said to Bill, we were talking on the phone the next day, I think, and I said to him, man, I'd have those recruits in on Saturday night because you can forget Cameron, you can forget the Smith Dome, you can forget Paulie. It's all about you, baby. He says the problem with these kids play Saturday nights. But there's no atmosphere, to me, than what the atmosphere is. And you saw it when, I want to tell you something. They had a 3-game losing streak, and as soon as that game started, the crowd was not going to let those guys let up the other night against Kansas State. And it was like a 7-point game, and here comes, you know, Thorpe off the bench, and now it's like a 15, 16-point game. It was the crowd, the 6th man got this team, and they just recaptured what they are. And that's the best of this place. I mean, it's second to none as far as I'm concerned.
I think I agree with everything Dicker said. A building is usually a building, but this is different. You sort of walk in and feel as if you're stepping into a little piece of basketball history. So many great players and coaches have been here. And as neat as that is, I think that's for those of us who appreciate the history of the game. The impact that the fans have on the atmosphere is what makes it unique and special. They're unbelievably loyal, they're loud, they're respectful. The Rock Chalk Jayhawk chant's one of my favorite things in all of college sports. I mean, it's really cool. I wasn't going to let anybody know this, but we went in to tape a segment a little while ago. There was nobody in there, so I did Rock Chalk Jayhawk by myself because I was free to do it without anybody getting mad that I was rooting for somebody. It was pretty cool. It wasn't as good as when everybody's in there doing it, but at least I got to do it. It was fun.
You know, there's venues around the country, and I grew up as an assistant in Philly in the Palestra. I was an assistant at Penn. The Palestra seats maybe 94. This seat's a little 16. And the Palestra is exactly like this. When they built the Palestra back in the 20s, this was built in the 50s, it was that arch ceiling that gives the acoustics. And when you watch like a Villanova-St. Joe game in the Palestra, it's like, are you kidding me? And it's the same here. When you see that, I mean, there's certain arenas around the country, and I've been fortunate enough to coach. The toughest place to coach, to me, was Reynolds Coliseum at Carolina State. Why? Because there was a balcony here, bleachers behind you, right across. This is the court, your feet on the bench, and the students would just surround you. And I'm telling you, the atmosphere at Reynolds, toughest place in the country to coach. Here, yeah, it's tough to coach, but you can still get to your team. But I remember we did the one game day here, and that was the night AC Law hit the buzzer 3 to beat him, or whatever it was. The place just went, you know. But no, when you look at MacArthur Court at Oregon in its heyday, Cove Fieldhouse with Maryland, obviously Cameron, the Palestra in Philly. But to me, for game day, with the students and the fans, like tomorrow morning, it's second to none. And then tomorrow night it's a carryover, and the show from 8 to 9, but it's the intros when they do the players, but it's after the trumpets do the Star Spangled Banner. And you talk about, and I just say, this is middle America. This is red, white, blue at its best. And then they get into Rock Chalk Jayhawk, man. If you don't have goosebumps and you don't want to sign and play here, let me know where you're going, so we're going to beat you anyhow. You know?
I know you say you like here and the Palestra and McCourt. All your players used to love it when you played at Vanderbilt, especially when they were on the other end of the court from you.
Because they couldn't hear me.
So they didn't have to listen to you.
I go out in the bar in the first half and go back for the second half when you coach a game. Well, you're talking about the plays, not the coach.
That's why they liked it.
Anything else, guys? Reese, how is it handling all these guys throughout the year?
No, wait, you got it backwards.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, here's maybe the best thing. I walked in to a meeting when one of the weekends when Bob Knight was with us, and he said, well, here comes John Buck. John Buck? Does he mean Joe Buck? Is he paying me a compliment? Is he insulting me? I don't know. He goes, you don't know who that is, do you? And I said, no. He goes, he's a famous lion tamer. And so that's sort of what it's like. The three week service. No, they're great. I mean, it's a lot of fun to challenge them. And I think the neatest thing about it is I have great respect for what all of them have accomplished in the game. And the unique thing about these guys is all four of us have egos. They've earned theirs on the court, but they defer enough and are secure enough to allow me to challenge their point of view. And, they never defer to when did you play, which is a neat thing because a lot of times I'm not shy about sharing my opinion, but there are times when maybe I agree 1,000% with what Digger's saying, completely agree, but I need to ask him from the other point of view in order to make him validate or back up his opinion, and they always respect it. And I think that's what makes our show work.
The chemistry for us, it's been more of knowing, like we just had a little production meeting going over the 10 o'clock show and the 11 o'clock show. And we know who we are and what we are. And it's more of how do we let the audience hear it, respect it, and understand it. And if they can hear it, and then they respect it, and then they understand it, it doesn't matter if we agree or disagree. You can't have everybody agreeing. You can't everybody disagreeing. So we bring out that balance so that you get each side so that you choose which one you want. It's like I'm in the minority. I always would foul with less than 10 seconds up 3. And 80% of the coaches won't do that. And it's funny, but because what was ironic, going back, we did game day at Memphis with Tennessee back in 08. Bruce Pearl is up 3 with less than 10.
Oh, here you go again.
Well, this is what gets me.
Anything else?
And he fouls Derrick Rose. Rose makes the first, intentionally missed the second, but they smother the rebound. They win by 4. So that's Calipari. That's his choice. So here it is. We're in San Antonio. And here comes Sharon Collins over half court. Here's Chalmers fouling. And I'm going like, and Derrick Rose is there. And it's like one of these. This Cal said, well, he's going to foul. And I'm going like, you better foul.
I've called 3.
Over. Let me finish.
I've called 3 games this season
So-
where the team
so-
up 3 didn't foul, won the game.
So my point is, now all of a sudden, here's what happens. He makes it, right? Rose doesn't score in the overtime because they're in shock that this game goes over. It's what you decide as a coach, what you believe in the psyche of the game. And to me, and when I coached, we always foul.
Well, why didn't you foul up 2?
80% of the coaches won't foul in that situation.
Why would you
So
foul?
that's-
If you're so afraid of
that's-
tying, you want you foul up 2.
That's not the situation I'm talking about.
But if it's what's the difference? You're afraid of being tied.
No, when you can win, I want to be up 1 with the ball out of bounds for 4 seconds. Because I'm going to run my press offense at half court and throw that long. Because even if you intercept it, for you to make that 3 to beat me versus intercept it up here under the basket, like we saw with the Syracuse game where they didn't foul and the kid hits the corner 3, that's why I would rather be up 1 with the ball with 4 seconds to go and run my press offense from half court and throw it long, because now we're going to win by 1, because you're not going to make that 90-foot for it. 94-foot put shot.
Reese?
How come you never talk about the Kentucky-Mississippi State game where Mississippi State got the ball and actually had a chance to win the game with the 2 after that?
I'm just talking about a situation where Kansas won a national title because Kevin Berry didn't foul.
See, I just know how to wind him up. You know?
Reese, where did that Louisville-Notre Dame 5-overtime game rank for you in terms of regular season games that you've seen?
Should have been over
Do
regulation.
you mean the first 39 minutes, which were horrific basketball, or the last 26, which was pretty awesome?
26.
The last 26 were, it was probably as dramatic, short of the Memphis-Tennessee 1-2 game that Digger referenced that we were at. It's probably the most dramatic game we've been to outside of that one, unless I'm forgetting one, Digger, right? But
I thought AC Law shot
yeah,
here.
well, you always played in the home crowd, though.
No, AC Law was with A&M.
No, I know it was well, I know, but I mean, you always played to the venue where we are.
Of course, that's market.
I think it's probably as dramatic a scene as we've had on game day. It was shocking because of the way it happened, what Grant did in that last minute, because it was not an entertaining basketball game for 39 minutes, and then the last 26 were off the charts good. So it was fun. I mean, I've told the story. It was great to watch. I enjoy watching the coaches and their demeanors. And where I was sitting was down close to the Notre Dame bench, and I think it was between the 3rd and 4th overtime maybe. And they're coming back to the bench. The Irish headed back that way, and Mike Bray lets out this Ric Flair-like yell and goes, "Woo!" And he's all excited, he's smiling, and I look down the other end, and Patino is spitting nails because this game should have been over twice, and he's just furious with it. It was great to watch the 2 perspectives of what ended up being a tie, or what was a tie game. And one guy felt like he was hanging in there with a shot to win it, and the other guy felt like he'd already given it away twice, and it was a great dramatic night for sure. It was fun. We'll take it again if you guys want to do it again.
Do you guys think there's a top team this year? Do you feel like everybody else think it's wide open for everyone?
Right now, I love Miami. Larenega's been there before. He's got an older team. They share the ball very well. I think Larkin, as a point guard, is amazing the way he can run that team. Their defense is solid. To win the other night at Florida State, which is usually a war between us two, just get it over with. But if you're looking like now, it's Miami. I said that a week ago. I thought they should have been number 1. Nothing against Indiana, nothing against Michigan or Duke. Duke's been there twice, and without Kelly, it's not the same Duke team. But it's to see Larkin not just get points, not just get assists, but to do things on defense. I mean, that team, they have no fear, and they got a lot of older players, and they respect him as a sophomore point guard. And Larenega just has those guys believing right now, and it would not surprise me, obviously, to see them play in 7 weeks from this coming Monday in Atlanta.
I think it would be. Digger's right. They're very good. They also have enough old guys to fill Del Boca Vista Retirement Village. I mean, they've got a bunch of old guys, and not one player on their team, not one, has played in a tournament game. Not one. So, I'm interested to see how they'll react if they get pushed a little bit. I don't mean to bring up sore subjects, but you guys have seen how it affects teams that are highly seeded, that are clearly better than their opponent. Game doesn't go well, gets tight. Now you're fighting, thinking, what's happening? We're supposed to beat this team. Happened to Missouri last year. That's a much happier topic for all of you, I'm sure. But, not for him, though. So I just called him out. That's our coordinating producer, Brett Austin, proud graduate of the University of Missouri.
Sorry about that.
But you guys have seen it happen time and time again. I completely agree with Digger. All of the parts are there for Miami to be very good. I'm waiting to see. I think every year's kind of wide open. I think the pool of teams that would be more likely to make it might be a little bit larger than last year. I was talking to Calipari earlier this season, and he said, last year, he said there might have been a few more who would sneak into the Final Four. He said, but one of 4 or 5 teams going to win the national championship. He said 4 of us made it to the Final Four. And he thought that at least a few weeks ago that the pool was probably more like 10 or 12. I'm not sure it's that big right now, but I still have when I did the power rankings thing this week, I still had Indiana number 1, but I don't think they're far and above everybody else.
Do
You
you give
know
them-
what's amazing this time of year? Think about it. To me, Tom Izzo, it's amazing how he gets whatever he has, and they go through the toughest schedule of anybody preseason. Bring it on. They'll get 2 or 3, like losing to Connecticut over to Germany. Really? And then all of a sudden, it all comes together. And forget last year, but 12 years before that, he's got 6 Final Four teams, of which 3 of those teams, how'd they get to the Final Four? And I'm watching these guys take on Michigan the other night. It was like a clinic, what they did. I mean, they got them down 30 in the second half. And finally, the guy all year, I said, Derek Nix has got to become a force in the paint. And so he gets his 14 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, with the shades of Draymond Green. But it's amazing how Izzo always comes up and finds a way to get these guys, whether if it's Payne, whether if it's Appling. You know, when you look at Harris as a freshman, you know, we talk about freshmen, and Harris is getting 21 game, 14 the other. And it just amazed me how he gets kids to believe. The same with Bill. Bill has a way with magic and all this with these guys. And when you take a look at Final 8 teams, Kansas is a Final 8 team, but so is Michigan State. And when you look at, you know, who's going to get the shot to get to Atlanta, we saw it happen last year. I didn't think Louisville could beat Michigan State out west. When they were heading west, I said, oh, vintage Izzo, he's going to be there. Louisville knocks them off. Or when we look back east to, here's Syracuse. Ha, you're home. Here comes Ohio State. So and that's what this year will become. You watch when all of things settle and we get through the selection show, and then we all see what's out there. Who can stumble? And then never forget this. Go back and look at history. The year Danny and the Miracles won it. Remember, there was teams in front that they couldn't beat that would lose. Like I think Purdue was one of those teams.
Temple.
And all of a sudden, but they can beat the team that upset the other team. So things fall in place when all of a sudden somebody in your bracket, you're saying, oh, we can't get by that. But somebody unexpectedly knocks them off, and you match up to the team that beat them better than they did, and you can knock that team off. And they end up playing Oklahoma for a championship. Was that the 3rd time or 4th time they played that year? So, I mean, you know, you can see those things fall in place. The Big Ten has that on paper this year. When you look at, we're talking about Michigan and Indiana, they could play 4 times if it ends up where they play for the Big Ten championship and they end up in the Final Four. Well, that's what happened back when Danny and the Miracles won it. Everything fell in place because of teams in front losing, and they moved forward in the brackets.
I agree with you that Izzo is like the MacGyver of basketball coaching. The guy can get to a Final Four with a slingshot, rock, and paperclip. but Reese, you made a point that, you know, Miami, those guys had never played an NCAA tournament. Don't you grade a little higher on Indiana and all
Butler
that?
got there?
What,
Remember when VCU and Butler got there?
True.
So there's always a first.
When you got to, you know, like the Big Ten, when you got to turn around and play Wisconsin one night, Michigan the next night, Michigan State, don't you think that, you know, when we get into March, that's going to help those teams?
Yeah.
Depends on your team. Generally speaking, it should.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we end up using stuff like that as either reasons or excuses. If they make it, we say, boy, look how that schedule hardened them. And if they get beat early, we go, wow, they must have been worn out by the schedule. Yeah, so, you know, I think it all depends on how the teams play and the matchups that Dicker talked about. I don't know that all of that has as big an impact sometimes as we make it, because we move the target a lot when we talk about those things. And we say, oh, they must have been worn out. You know, we always say if a team makes a run in their conference tournament and then gets beat in the first round of the NCAA tournament, they were worn out. Well, UConn, you know, ended up running through the Big East tournament and won 11 straight games at the end, won the national championship, and all of a sudden it was them. Well, they got momentum. Well, which is it? You get momentum or you get worn out? It sort of depends on what point you're trying to support.
See, the coaches will approach it as a 2-day tournament every weekend. You know, once it gets into, and that to me is, when we used to prepare that way, like we went to the Sweet 16 and Final 8 twice, we'd always do, if we're playing, you got 4 teams going, so we're playing somebody, and then there's 2 other teams playing. What you try to do in that Monday, Tuesday practice without the kids knowing, let's say all of a sudden you're going to play Michigan, and they're going to play that 1-3-1 zone. You haven't seen it all year. Well, you don't want to wait to do it Friday if you're going to play them Saturday for the regional, you know, to get to the Sweet 16. You got to go back Monday and Tuesday. Let's go over this for 5 minutes and make sure we have our zone offense ready against this. And that's how I used to prepare. was to do the things early in the week before we went on the road, even though we're playing somebody on Thursday and then we got to play the winner of somebody on Saturday. We got to make sure that we got that in so it's in our heads. And then when you start showing tapes by that time of the year, and then you go through the practice the day before, you've been there, you've done it, versus the unknown. Oh my God, we got to get ready for this. But I think most coaches, as you know, the great coaches, they treat it as, we're not looking to Atlanta, we're not looking to the regionals, we're looking to who do we have in the first 48 games. Who do we play Thursday, and who are we going to play Saturday? Who are we going to play Friday, and then who are we going to play Sunday? You know, to get to the Sweet 16. And then you just take the same approach. So, to me, I watch a lot of games, and I love college basketball. I think it's exciting. All these critics in the game are slow and the referees on. That's fine. But let me tell you something. As a fan, I don't look at it that way. I mean, I watch.
Didn't have to call the LSU South Carolina game last night.
I watched that game Monday night here. I go to the Notre Dame DePaul game Wednesday night, and DePaul fights. They're like 1-9 or 1-8 coming in, and they fight and go on 11-1 run to get the lead, and it goes overtime. I'm going, good for them. They got a lot of young players. This is a growing experience for them. Obviously, they're going to have to play, early in a Big East tournament. But to me, the kids are the game. And that's what we forget sometimes. These guys have played 100 AAU games every year for 3-4 years. You got your McDonald's All-Americans. You got the other guys showing up. But you know what? When you see all these other guys playing the game today, you're like, whew, where the hell's that kid from? And that's what makes college basketball, to me, so exciting. And I just think that this year's tournament, we can look at the top 4, but it's not going to surprise me. We're talking today, can Georgetown sneak up on people? Yeah. Why? One guy, Otto Porter. And go back to when Connecticut lost their last game in Stores to Notre Dame. They had to play that Tuesday against South Florida. Well, guess what? Little team meeting. Kemba Walker, here's the ball. You're the player coach. And what did he do? He was averaging about 28 points a game and getting another 20 points a game off his assist. And here they go. Win 1, 2, 3. Oh, Big East champs. Let's go. Let's play 6 more. National champs. So that's the unexpected. And I can see that happening this year for somebody. When I talked to, that's why I said Otto Porter from Georgetown. He's that kind of player. So there's always wild card. The mystery team to me is UCLA. How they got embarrassed at Cal last night. I mean, that was an embarrassment. I mean, they were down 20 plus. The final score of 13 wasn't any indication of the game. But Mike Montgomery just got them going, and they just said, not tonight. And Crable's guy said, you're done. And then we watched Colorado take care of Arizona, and they've been top 10 all year, and I'm still trying to figure out why. When you look at teams that, why are they still top 10? And then all of a sudden, here we go. Colorado says not enough. And now all of a sudden we're seeing this new team out west in Colorado. Colorado State. Oof. Now, on Selection Sunday, we got in. Notre Dame, we're in. First round matchup, Colorado State. Are you kidding me? But, I mean, that's what it's going to be this year when you see a lot of this stuff. So, it's like, what the heck? I mean, Temple goes up and destroys in Madison Square Garden, Syracuse. Wyeth and Anthony Lee, they just punish them. They lose at home last night. And they're 5-5 now in the A-10. Then we have to win the A-10 tournament to get a bid. And Charlotte's just showing up. And, hey, Butler, come here. We're coming into your house. Man. So, I mean, this is what I love about the next 2 weeks. And then you got the first week in March, with the second and third, and going into March 9th, the last weekend, and then the Big East starts on the 12th. Some of the other smaller conferences start that weekend. It's going to be crazy this year. And I think when you look at what's going to go on that big weekend with the 48 games after the play-in games, there's going to be a lot of shocks out there, which makes the game, to me, bring it on. March Madness is here.
We need to wrap it up, guys, so you can watch practice.
All right, gang. Anything else?